theyeshiva.net.
Welcome to the Rabbi Reuven Epstein Show, number 11, with a very special guest here tonight. We want to remind our listeners and our viewers that you can email us at email@marriagepro.co, and you can watch this show as well as all of the shows on all podcast platforms. We also want to remind you about our dating and marriage curriculums at marriagepro.co, as well as a new initiative which was started by one of our listeners who started something called NASA, which is a group of single girls who want to follow up with some of our speakers from this show, smaller groups where they can ask questions and have sort of like a round table Zoom. You can email NASA now, NAASEHNOW@gmail.com for more information. And we also want to remind you to follow the Torah Anytime Daily Dose and subscribe at 929-355-4268. With that being said, I have so many questions and I have so much content, that things I want to cover tonight, that I don't want to talk so much. You want to skip my normal introduction to get straight down to it, because I'll tell you why. Tonight we have on Rabbi YY Jacobson, and I'm looking into Rabbi Jacobson's bio, which is very extensive, and I'm going to forget most of the things about him. I'll give you the rough story here. Rabbi Jacobson is an international speaker. He's an author of A Tale of Two Souls on the Tanya, a journey through the fundamentals of Chassidus, and the Amunah series, Captain, My Captain. Maybe I'm missing one or two, Rabbi, please forgive me, as well as the dean of the yeshiva.net. But I want to start with my first question. Rabbi Jacobson, you're with me, yeah? Okay.
I'm with you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and pleasure, Rabbi Epstein.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to tell you, I do this. This is the 11th show that we did. And the idea behind the show was we wanted to have a platform, which is Torah Anytime, and a format wherein people can learn various things from inspiring and influential people who are out there changing the world. But usually they hear it through a lecture, a speech, a snippet, maybe a Torah Anytime daily dose, something to that effect. And I said, you know, maybe we could just have a conversation. We could just schmooze with people. So this is our 11th show, and many of our shows we have on two people. Tonight we're having on just you, Rabbi, and people. There's even a girl who went so far that she is transcribing all of the shows. I don't know how many. It's like unbelievable. She's sending me not just snippets, but mamish, like sending me the whole entire show. You said
this. Looking forward to the book, Interviews with Rabbi Epstein.
Me too. Me too. Somebody's doing the work.
Latest by Hanukkah.
Someone's doing the work for me. And I don't.
Inspiring interviews, yeah.
So, but over here, I want to jump straight into my first question, which is, I know that growing up, you were influenced by the Rebbe, by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, that's an understatement, because you were part of the Chayzrim who would review the Rebbe's shiurim after, or the Mamarim, the Sichas. Now, before I start, I have to say something. I have to just tell you right off the bat. I am ignorant about certain topics. The first show we had on Rabbi Yossi Ben Shushan, who deals with people who have substance abuse. Now, I didn't know that you're supposed to call it substance abuse. So forgive me if I don't say any specific terms. Just go with it. Okay. So that being the case, okay. Forgiven. Thank you. So now,
raw is always better. Raw.
Thank you. Good. Authentic. So the sichas, the mamarim that the Rebbe had, and one of the things that the Chayzrim did was they would talk after Shabbos or Yantiv, and they would repeat what the Rebbe said. So when I was first hearing this, I thought to myself, okay, I mean, I've heard a lot of speeches. I could repeat some speeches, not a big deal. And then I heard your brother Reb Shimon say, no, you don't understand. They could go on for hours and hours and hours. And sometimes it would be a 3-day yontif, and you'd have to remember 20 hours of information. You're not talking about someone who's giving a speech at one of these conferences where they just say a story for 99 minutes and then they have a punchline at the end. That's not who the Rebbe was. How? I just want to understand how is it possible? Meaning, what was that like, sitting in a room of people to be able to gather all that information and then transcribe it or put it down into a format? And then I understand that the Rebbe would then look it over, so that you couldn't fudge the numbers here. You couldn't just make stuff up. It had to be as accurate that you're presenting it to the presenter afterwards. Right. how did that happen? Tell me about that experience.
So very briefly, to say that this was a stressful experience would be an understatement. But it would also be fair and just to say this is one of the great privileges of my life and one of the greatest experiences that I think I'll ever have in my life. The Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory used to what's called Fabring, hold a public gathering every Shabbos and every Yom Tov. And he would present shiurim or sichas, talks, maimorim, for many, many hours. A Fabringing could go from 3 hours to 11 hours. And this is Shabbos, Yom Tov. There's no recording devices. Tape recorders, for those who remember tape recorders, Aleim Hashalom. Nobody's writing, nobody's recording. Everything has to be memorized. Now, the Rebbe wasn't a person who would tell stories and jokes. Each sikha could be an hour and a half, 2 hours, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. And they were extremely intricate and profound. There could be a sikha, a whole long shir in a Rambam, in Karbonis or Avodah or Tumah and Tara, a whole long Rashi on the Parsha, a sugi in Bavli or Yerushalmi, a sugi in Kabbalah, Jewish philosophy, Chassidus, Machshava, Chakira, a deep pilpul in Rishonim and Acharonim, in Halacha, contemporary discussions on Hashkafa, education, outreach, kiruv, inner struggle. And it went on for hours. And as you know, he was a brilliant man. Thank you. Brilliant man. And his knowledge, I would say, he knew every line of every commentary of the Vilna Gaon on Zohar. He knew every Malbim. He knew every Yerushalmi. He knew Kisvei Harizal by heart. I'm not talking about Bavli and Rambam and Shulchan Aruch. And the Rebbe wouldn't read from notes. He wouldn't read from notes, and he wouldn't tell a lot of stories. It was not entertaining in that sense. And it was very, very profound stuff. When I was a young bacher, I was asked to join a group. It was a small group headed by a man who's an elderly man today, Rabbi Yoel Khan Shlita. And they were, so to speak, the oral scribes. And our job was to memorize to the best of our ability the Rebbe's shiurim and presentations, his sichos, maimarim. And right after Shabbos, meet and review it. And Rabbi Yoel Khan would review it, and the arguments would go on for hours trying to reconstruct the material. Notes were taken, and then a whole week, there was a group of people that would sit and transcribe it on paper, and from this were created the hundreds of volumes of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings.
Wow. Now, how did you, I just want to understand, how did you, a 15-year-old bacher, now, how did you even understand he's quoting your Yerushalmi? Most 50-year-old men haven't opened the Yerushalmi. Yeah. So I guess, I have an older brother, Sivan Jacobson, Rabbi Sivan Jacobson, who joined that team. And I guess when I was a younger child, I used to stand at the Rebbe's Fabrengens from a very, very young age. And I guess, developed a certain niche. And we would review at Shabbos after the Fabrengen or Yom Tov, and I guess he felt that I had a certain skill for it. So at a very young age, he suggested that I join him and the team. And I had the privilege of doing it. Until today, I want to tell you, the moment Shabbos ends, my wife knows. Psychologically, I'm stressed. It's now 30 years. The Rebbe passed away in 1994. So 26 years ago, the Rebbe's passing. But till today, the moment Shabbos ends, something happens because my brain remembers that Mitzvah Shabbos. I knew I'm not sleeping all night. And Sunday I'm not sleeping, and Sunday night I'm not sleeping. And it was such intense work, but it was really incredible work. You really had to prepare yourself as best as you can. The real hachana was just to sit and learn and steig nonstop. But the Rebbe did have a certain mahalach hamachshava. He had a certain combination of Reb Chaim, the Briske Derech, together with the Rogatchover, together with the Balatanya. So he had a certain style in which he would analyze things and dissect things. Mm-hmm. And they were very creative, very, very fascinating. I didn't understand everything, but I tried to absorb. So sometimes I wouldn't even understand, but I would try to absorb his words. And then later, it can be reconstructed. I hear. I think you could study it later, but you're just hearing it.
Sometimes, yeah. In fact, one of the keys to memorizing talks for hours, and this is interesting, whenever you want to memorize something, is you have to be completely empty when you're listening, meaning there's no thinking about the fact that you're thinking. If you're thinking about the fact, wow, this is a great shiur, he's brilliant, it's awesome, it's inspiring, I'm going to use it, then your ego is in place. To really be able to absorb, you have to be what's called a klei reika, meaning the I must be completely absent. There is nothing in the world but you being completely opening to listening to the words of your Rebbe. Nothing, not even the feeling that it's geschmack, because that also obstructs the ability to really absorb. You know why children remember everything? Our children remember everything because they don't have an intellectual ego. They're like wet sponges. They just take it in. We as adults, we're already critical, right? Anyone who's listening right now to this show, they are already forming an opinion about me or about you. I promise you, they're not listening. As adults, it's very hard for us to listen, especially Jews. We don't listen. We have opinions.
I was going to say, I wonder if you're hacking into my emails. It's unbelievable.
It's a fascinating concept. And this is called, in Hasidic language, it's called bittul. Bittul b'metzias. You have to completely suspend yourself, your intellectual ego, and become literally an empty space where there's no I whatsoever, no intellectual identity. And then you'll be shocked how much you can absorb.
Wow. It's like Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, meaning that his spotless.
Right. Medrash Shmuel says he learned how to receive Torah from Sinai.
Right. Well, I was going to say that Matzah Shabbos, your wife probably says, "Nu." So what did we talk about the whole Shabbos?
I've learned how to deal with it over the years, but in the beginning, the earlier years, it was just, I just knew it's Shabbos, like my body was just triggered. It's like, you're going in like the Navy SEALs, you're going into real rigorous work. But it was also extraordinary, rewarding work in terms of learning and memorizing and transcribing and really gaining a bird's eye view of Judaism and of the world. That's what it was.
Wow. Unbelievable.
The Rebbe was a very, he's the antithesis of a narrow-minded thinker. His scope was just always so global and, Nigla and Chassidus and Kabbalah and Machshava and Mechker and everything converged into a seamless whole. It was so refreshing. He could speak about a Rambam and Hilchas Niskei Momen, about a bull goring another bull, and then apply it to psychological struggles of people. It was just so refreshing to be able to see that synthesis and mosaic of Yiddishkeit. Very rich, very rich.
Now, I want to come back to the Rebbe in a minute, but where did who else at that time in your life, like which other people, do you have like a specific Rebbe who influenced you to like get into where you are today, or somebody else that you were close to within, I don't know, your family, Chassidus, like somebody else that had an impact on you?
My father of blessed memory was a great influence on me. My father was a very interesting person. He grew up in communist Russia, suffered terribly under Stalin. His father was arrested and tortured, exiled to Siberia, almost shot, suffered terribly. Then they escaped after the war. And my father became a seasoned journalist for more than 50 years. He was the correspondent of Yediot Achronot, which is the largest Israeli daily newspaper, a very secular newspaper, but he was its correspondent in United Nations. He actually succeeded Elie Wiesel, who was the previous correspondent. They were very close friends because Elie Wiesel was a journalist. And then my father worked for the Daily Tribune. He worked for Time magazine. He worked for many Yiddish newspapers. And then he founded his own Yiddish weekly called the Allgemeine Journal, which was a very interesting newspaper. It had all the great Yiddishist writers in an era when Yiddish was really very, very powerful, not only in the Hasidic world, but also in the socialist Yiddishist world, which was often very left-wing and even anti-religious. So it was a very, very interesting home to grow up in terms of the types of people who would come, in terms of the type of things and issues that were discussed at the Shabbos table. My father covered, things like the Eichmann trial, the Ecumenical Council in Rome, when the Pope in the 1960s took off the blame of the Jewish people for murdering, who, Yoshkala, and all these types of things. So I really got, I think, a very interesting education from my father. I had great teachers over the years, but certainly my formative years, my greatest influence was the wisdom and the perspectives of the late Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Now, I'm looking from the outside. The Rebbe seems to have had an impact almost unlike there's certain people who, okay, they turn people on to certain concepts and ideas, but the Rebbe seems to have created like armies and armies of people who are like legionnaires. Like they're doing, the idea of shlichus is like the Rebbe has sent me out and he's created a directive. How did he have that? Meaning, besides was it his charisma? Was it what did he have a different viewpoint of the world? I mean, you throw a dart, there will be a chassid out there. You give him, chopsticks, and he will build you a Chabad house with all the hidurim and changing the world from wherever he is. How did the Rebbe? What was it about him? What was it?
I think it's a great question. I'm not sure I can give the accurate answer to it, but I could share some of my perspectives. I think there were at least three features that characterized the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zechrona Livracha that contributed to this. Number one was the fact that for him, Judaism was really a blueprint for humanity. They say Avraham Avinu was the founder of monotheism. He was not. There were many monotheists before, but Avraham Avinu was the one who believed in its power to change the world. The Rambam writes in Hilchas Avodah Zarah that Avraham Avinu would go from town to town and hold press conferences and preach emunah. There were a lot of people who believed in one God, but they had shtiblach, they ate herring, they had shalashudas, Mesu Shelach believed in God, and Chanoich believed in God, and Shem believed in God, and Ava believed in God. But Avram really had that confidence to know that this is the truth of the world. Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Keil Olam. And in that sense, I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe in a post-Holocaust era, really with every fiber of his being, he believed and he exuded this to his students and disciples, that Yiddishkeit has nothing to be embarrassed with. On the contrary, this is what every person is looking for. This is what every Jewish soul is yearning for. Go out. Don't be defensive. He turned Judaism from inward outward. He believed really in that vision of L'sakin Olam b'malchus Shin Daled Yud, that we could and we must transform the landscape of planet Earth. And he spoke about it. He taught it. He demonstrated it. And he also, number two, he developed an approach to Judaism that allowed his Hasidim and his disciples to teach it to people of all segments of life. Very often, one of our struggles that we have, I see, I travel to a lot of yeshivas and schools, is people say, it's irrelevant. Gemara is irrelevant. Mishnayos is irrelevant. Halach is irrelevant. Davening is irrelevant. Shabbos is irrelevant. Shavuos is irrelevant. It's like, it's not inspiring. It's not meaningful to me. Well, how am I going to persuade a secular Jew to come closer to Yiddishkeit if I can't make Yiddishkeit relevant? And one of the Rebbe's greatest gifts was he taught a Judaism that is relevant. It's meaningful. It's psychologically transformative. You look at it and you say, wow, this is good stuff. This can compete with the greatest and most powerful movements in the world. On the contrary, this is like the truth of reality. It's also a Judaism that's not afraid of science, biology, physics, cosmology, history, psychology, philosophy. On the contrary, as the Rebbe would always say, Torah is the blueprint of the universe, which means you will only understand the depth of science or psychology or physics, including quantum mechanics, through Yiddishkeit, through Torah. So that all-embracing, universal, extremely relevant message resonated with a generation of his students who realized that, yes, with this material, we can go out and change the world and bring Dvar Hashem to the world. The third aspect I would say is, maybe the most important is, the Rebbe was an incredible mentor and leader. What do I mean? There are teachers who create wonderful students. There are leaders who create extraordinary followers. The Rebbe was the type of leader who knew how to create leaders. He knew how to imbue people and empower them with the confidence that you can go and change the world. And he did this with thousands of young people. And I'll be very frank with you. I grew up in yeshiva. I had a lot of classmates. Not everybody was brilliant. Not everybody was charismatic. Not everybody was talented. Not everybody was resourceful. And many of them, if you would look at the trajectory of their life when they were 16, 17, 18, you may see it as more, plain and simple, maybe a little mediocre. Today, I visit their communities and I see the Rebbe took ordinary people and he made their lives extraordinary. I think it was Shakespeare who said, there are those who are born great, there are those who develop greatness, and there are those where greatness is thrust upon them. The Lubavitcher Rebbe thrust greatness upon every person he met. He did not believe that you're small. He loved saying that every Jew is a piece of infinity. If you're a piece of infinity, you're invincible, you are powerful, and you have the koyach of the Meshaleach, of the Ribono Shel Olam, to change the world. Shluchei shel Adam k'maaseh. When people grow up with this real inner conviction, then, to quote General Montgomery, the difficult we do immediately, and the impossible takes a little longer.
I love that line. I love the line, Shluchei shel Adam k'maaseh. You are a shliach of the Eibishter, so...
Yeah.
The
Rebbe loved quoting a chakira. Rabbi Yosef Engel is one of the Gaonei Poland. He passed away in 1920, Rabbi Yosef Engel. He has a sefer Lekach Tov. So the Rebbe would always quote a chakira. He opens up Lekach Tov with the chakira. What's the gather of a shliach? 3 levels of shlichus. One is that the action is the shliach. It's just that by doing this, I'm yoytze the meshaleach, or that the action is attributed to the Meshaleach, like a long arm, or that the Shliach himself during the Shlichus becomes the Meshaleach. And he proved from around 40 places in Shas, different I found him. So the Rebbe would say, whichever darga you are, whichever madrega you are, but remember, you have the koyach of the Meshaleach.
I hear. It's funny, now that you're saying it, I could just imagine that the sugya of shlichus is probably, the sugya of, I'm not talking about, it's probably a well-studied sugya in yeshivas and chabad. I hear. Okay, so.
Kedushin.
Yeah.
And now, where do you learn shlichus from? Shachatu oisai kol kahal adas Yisrael ben arbayim. The Gemara says kedushin mamalef, that it says all the Yidden have to shech the carbon paste. The Gemara says it's impossible. For me, you learn shluchas aladam kamaisa. So the Rebbe would say that this shlichus you learn from Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why? Because the moment you realize that you're a shliach of the Ribono Shel Olam, you can go out of all of your meitzarim, all of your confinements. Our confinements in life come from the fact that we surrender to a life of quiet desperation. We don't identify that we are manifestations of divine infinity in this world. So Yetzias Mitzrayim is the core of shlichus.
Wow. I want to ask you a question because, doing this show has opened me up to a very diverse audience, something that my regular shiurim have not necessarily reached. Great. Or some people, it's an interesting dynamic of what's happening. And Baruch Hashem, all the taiva. But there's a segment, a lot of people who reach out to me and they say, I think I have a kayach to give a share in Rambam or in Chayvus Halvavas, or I could be, the next speaker. I could be the next whatever. And I'm like, Gavaldi, go ahead and do it. And they're reaching out. They want guidance, questions. But in a certain sense, what you're saying here, and I've had different people over who are part of Chabad, and they all say the same thing. Whether you're a kindergarten mora or whether they have a certain fire. I am doing shlichus here. I'm on fire. I'm jumping into the deep end, and then it will grow. Meaning my platform will grow. Today I'm teaching this. Tomorrow I'll be teaching this. What? I'm sorry.
Jumping over the deep end, not into the deep end.
over, and the idea of like accepting achrayus is a certain key to success. Because a lot of people, they're like thinking like, if I took another 5 minutes in my day to do this and this, and it's like, no, you're not thinking big enough. And when you think big enough, just think even bigger.
The Rebbe was a very tolerant human being. I saw him for many years. One thing he could not tolerate, when he saw that people are squandering their potentials, he could not tolerate it. He wanted every single person to become like a world leader. Like he once said at a Fabrengen, he said these words, he said, I would be happy if in Crown Heights I'm left with 9 people so I can daven with a minyan. Everybody else, please leave. Go build Yiddishkeit, build bridges, build yeshivas, build moistas, build mikvahs, build camps, build shuls, build shiurim.
Wow.
Build. I'm happy to stay here with a minyan. Now, most Rebbes, after the war, their goal was to build a huge kehillah around them. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, I'm fine with 9 people. Everyone else go. He really could not stand when people looked at themselves as small, as insignificant, as valueless. He was just allergic to that philosophy.
Wow. Now,
I think it left a very deep impact on people who came in contact with him. Certainly his Talmidim, his Chassidim, it changes you. When you have a person who believes in you like that, you start believing in yourself. You're never the same.
Now, I know that Chabad has and I want to segue here, but I know that you've spoken about this idea that the Rebbe was very big into using technology or using whatever resources. I'm not going to say whatever resources, because obviously there's a limit to everything, right? But meaning using resources, being resourceful in spreading the Devar Hashem and fulfilling your mission. You know, it's like with the Navy SEAL, you send them out with certain tools, but sometimes you have to improvise and you use whatever it is. I know that you're involved in like, I'm going to call it, I'm not going to say the word that I was going to say, but meaning you have like a slichus, a very big slichus when it comes to El. And it's with music and so when I grew up in yeshiva, it was more like the type where like they walk in, they give a clap on the bima and they go, Rabbi YY, it's El. They used to cry. We don't cry, but they used to cry. You know that shmooze that they give in yeshivas? Okay, so that's how I always heard it. This is different. The question is that obviously I think that the generation has a lot of different needs than we've ever had. But how do you view that? Meaning we have such a diverse spectrum of people that we have today. I want to hear your take on.
Yeah. I'll be very honest with you. I'm uncomfortable with a musical slichus myself. And in fact, I'm not part of a musical slichus. Not that I criticize people who have different spiritual needs, but growing up by the Rebbe, I remember the atmosphere of slichus, the yira, and there was a chazan doing slichus like they do in all Jewish communities. And at the end of slichus, they would start singing. And the Rebbe was often crying. They would sing, the song that he composed, Rachamana de Yane, you know that song.
Yeah, I love that song.
The way our slichus came about is, a few years ago, somebody said to me in my kehillah here in Monsei Chaim, said, people are just not in the mood. They're just not in the mood. All they hear is that used to be that your Elta Zayda would start trembling Rosh Chodesh Elul, like the fish, and even the fish in water are trembling.
Yeah.
There's a good old anecdote. I don't know if it's true, but it's a great anecdote. The Beis Halevi woke up Reb Chaim Brisker for slichus when he was 5 years old, early, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Reb Chaim was sleeping. He was a little boy. He says, Chaimel, afilu the fish, even the fish in water are trembling by slichus. Come out, get out of bed. And then the anecdote goes that Reb Chaim tells his father, Tata, if the fish were on a mattress under a warm blanket, they also wouldn't tremble. So people were saying, we hear all these stories, but it's not speaking to us. Maybe you could fabring a little bit before slichus. So I said, fine. And we improvised. It was mamash the first time. It was not streamed live. It was just the people there. And people started to sing nigunim. Somebody took out a guitar. And it was a transformative. We sat for a few hours till 1 o'clock in the morning. I even said then a line from the Tzemach Tzedek that I want to tell you, I think had one of the greatest impacts. I speak a lot, but it probably went to millions of people because wherever I go for 5 years, 6 years, I always hear. I said it that line. The Tzemach Tzedek said, I said it that night. What's the difference between children and adults? Children don't keep grudges. Adults keep grudges. Children forgive. They say, I hate you, Tati, but then they forgive you. Adults don't forgive. And he said that children choose being happy over being right. And adults choose being right over being happy. And I said, it's before slichus, let's be children. Let's choose being happy over being right. Ask forgiveness and forgive. And suddenly hundreds and hundreds of Jews came. And then I realized we don't have a right to deprive a young generation from inspiring them to be able to have a real relationship with Hashem. And that's how the Slichus events came. The next year, 1,000 people came. And the next year, 2,000 people came. And the truth is, after I finished the Kumzitz or the Fabrengen, there's a lot of, I always announce, a lot of minyanim for Slichus. Some people stay with my friend Rabbi YY and they do a musical Slichus. And many people go back to their shows and they do their regular Slichus minyanim, including yours truly. Now, I've heard criticism. People said it's really not in the spirit of Slichus. It's not Yiras Shamayim. And I have to say that I completely identify. I know the world they're coming from. I respect that world and I identify with it. But to be able to just criticize and say that when you're communicating Yiddishkeit in a way that really touches people's hearts and people's souls, I think we have to understand that different souls may need different forms of inspiration to touch them. And as long as it's according to Shulchan Aruch, it should be celebrated. And there is room for diversity. Shulchan Aruch, is not only one type. There's halacha, but within halacha, there could be so many different colors and shades and forms of expression.
100%. I love that. I love the answer. I think that we are certainly living in a very interesting time. Again, I think that there's a lot of people who they get, I'm not going to use the word inspiration, but they get information from various outlets, various platforms, various things, whether it's newspapers, whether it's wherever it may be. And there's no question, different people need different things, and understanding what people are coming from, and what you're giving them, like you're giving them a drop, and one day me and you will also shake, hopefully, when we hear the words Elul. But until that point, like each on our own darga to sort of, get what we need.
No, we do shake when we hear Elul. That's where I disagree. People don't realize our youth is incredible. The Jewish people are an incredible, incredible people. That's another thing I learned from the Rebbe. He could not tolerate Lashon Hara and Klal Yisrael. The Jewish people are an incredible people. Just think about this. God spoke to us how long ago, Rabbi Reuven? 3,333 years ago. That's a nice amount of time. 3333, exactly. You know that. This year is 3333 for Matan Torah. And Hashem did not speak to us again in 3,333 years. He spoke once, and he did not speak to us again since 3,500 years ago. And 2,000 years of those 3,000 years, we have experienced immense suffering. And yet we're here today, 3,500 years later, learning Torah, celebrating Yiddishkeit, arguing yes minyan, no minyan, how many people at the minyan, should we make a minyan, no minyan, Eric caution, we're arguing about a minyan. The Jewish people are an incredible, incredible people, and our youth is an incredible youth. We just have to know the language and the mechanism to be able to tune into people's neshamas and bring it to the fore, and then you will see the dazzling spiritual radiance and brilliance on the face of every one of our young Jewish men and women.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you mentioned before.
My friends say, why do you do it this way? I do it this way. I say, listen, my friend, there are 15 million Jews. Unfortunately, most of them are assimilated. Even those who call themselves religious, trust me, many of them are struggling deeply, and a lot of things are only on the outside, okay? Even if I get by an event 5,000 people, and even if there's 30,000 people watching live, 40,000 people watching, there's another 13 million Jews for you to deal with. Instead of criticizing and judging, go change the world. Go do something. Teach, inspire, kindle sparks, embrace souls. There's so much work to do. Everybody today must become an ambassador. The word shlichus should not be hijacked by Chabad.
What's that Joey Newcomb song? You don't have to be Chabad to want, it's such a great song.
Sakin Oilam b'Malchus Shin Daled Yud is not only a Nusach Chabad, it's in every
city.
Ashkenaz, Sfar, Dari, Yemen, Eidut HaMizrach. The Sepharno writes, today is Beis Sivan, the day that Hashem said, "Va'atem tiyuli mamleches koyanim v'goy kodesh." asks Rabbeinu Avadia Sifarno, the Italian 15th century great sage, what's Mamleches Kohen and V'Goy Kaddish? What, every Jew is a melech, every Jew is a priest, is a prince. And he says, yeah, every Jew is charged with the responsibility to influence all of civilization. There's so much work. Instead of criticizing, go do. Light up the world in your way.
Wow. I love it. Now, you mentioned about traveling around to different communities. I want to hear your experiences and all that, but something that I've heard on the show from various speakers was specifically about the South African community. So many people have mentioned, they said, they're inspired by so many different places. And they said, South Africa has a certain... So I want to ask you specifically about that, because I know you were there. I know you went to Sinai and Daba.
I was in Sinai and Daba twice. And I actually, just now, last few weeks, I had 2 lectures with South Africa community. We had thousands of Jews from South Africa. Thousands of Jews. We did one right before Pesach, Zoom, and the yeshiva.net, and we did one a few days ago. And tomorrow I'm doing with Cape Town, the whole Cape Town community. Thousands of Jews come together to learn. So
what's the secret?
South Africa has a special gift. There's a lot of Achdus there. It's a relatively small community, 50, 60,000 Jews in Johannesburg, 15, 20,000 Jews in Cape Town, probably less, 10,000 Jews. But they work together. The Rabbanim work together, the Askanim work together, the Manhigim work together, and they have a spirit. They have a good spirit, and I think it's the gift of Achdus. When I was there, I said at Sinai and Daba, and Rabbi Warren Goldstein was there. I said, try imagining if the Shabbos Project would have been initiated in New York. What would have happened, Rabbi Epstein?
It would have started in Flatbush and ended in Flatbush.
It came from South Africa. Relative to New York, South Africa is a very tiny community. Yeah? In 2 blocks in Borough Park, you have what they have in South Africa. And yet from there, they created an initiative that really impacted so powerfully the Jewish world. There's also a Varmkeit. They're warm people. They have a Varmkeit. And it's interesting that South African community originates from the Lita, Lithuania. The Ponevezher Rav Kahneman, Zeichet Tzadik Livroch, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahneman would go almost every year to fundraise because a lot of his community in Ponevezher in Lithuania migrated to South Africa, used to raise money for his Moisdus in Bnei Brak, including the Ponevezher Yeshiva. And they have a certain kavod haTorah, a certain Varmkeit, even those who were secular and go playing golf on Shabbos, but there's a certain respect for a shul, respect for Yiddishkeit, respect for a Rav. Another major component over there is where America and similar countries reform were the first ones to come, they set the standard. In South Africa, orthodoxy set the standard. That makes a very big difference.
Interesting.
Those are some of the features.
Now, tell me about other places you've gone and you've traveled around.
I had the chus to visit, maybe 500 or 600 Jewish communities over the last 2 decades. Incredible. Every place has its unique genre, its unique flavor. The Arizal writes that, in every place in the world, Hashem has nitzutzas, the sparks, that you have to elevate. The Gemara says, the reason we went into Golus is to bring converts. So the Balatanya and the Nefesh HaChaim ask, how many converts did we bring already? And they say, it's the nitzutzas. It's every place has its unique flavor. And when you see how they serve Hashem with that unique identity, that unique genre, it gives a new flavor to Yiddishkeit. I was not long ago in Antwerp. A place like Antwerp is fascinating. Why? It's one of the only places in the world left where you have Jews without a beard and payas, like Hasidim without Streimlach. They look secular, they are secular, but they speak a perfect Yiddish. 3% intermarriage in Antwerp. 3% intermarriage. I asked the Rav Schiff, is the chief rabbi, the Isabel Zechusid, 3% intermarriage? We have in Massachusetts 90% intermarriage. And the reason is because every single Jewish kid in Antwerp goes to a Jewish school. It may not be a very frum school. It may not be a school saturated with Baba Kama and Masechtas Zvachim, but it's a Jewish school. There's a Jewish identity, a Jewish culture. That was amazing. It's also the only kehillah in the world that remains uninterrupted from before the war. You don't have such a kehillah. It continued, and it still has the flavor from pre-Holocaust shtetl life. It's very, very interesting. I went to a place like Perth, Australia. Incredible. Incredible how the rabbi there holds up the community. Places like Brisbane, Surfer's Paradise, of course, Russia. I come from Russia. My parents both come from Russia. If you want to see a miracle, you want to see a miracle like Kriyas Yamsuf, you go to Russia. For 70 years, every vestige of Judaism was uprooted. Stalin murdered more people than Hitler, 50 million people. He told me, Reb Shimon Russell's a therapist in Yerushalayim. He told me that he spoke to Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal. And he was thinking about a Russian Jew, who was naming a child after a Zayda from Russia who completely left Yiddishkeit. And Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky said, Jews who came out of Russia, don't judge anything ever. No one will understand what Russian Jewry went through. The gzeres, the redifus are unfathomable. You go to Russia today? Pasha, incredible to see a menorah by the Kremlin, a few feet from Stalin and Lenin. And I think poor Stalin and Lenin must be turning over in their grave in their mausoleum. 3,000 children pre-corona screaming Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad by the Kremlin. I met the chief rabbi of Moscow, Rabbi Beryl Lazar, and he told me that just in Moscow, there are more than 70 Yiddish moizdas, and that just Chabad in Russia has more than 100 full-time day schools, yeshivas, with already a few 100,000 children who graduated, kosher the Yiddish moizdas. If this is not a miracle, I don't know what is a miracle. But really, every place, South America is fascinating, Europe, every community. I can talk to you a lot about this, but it's really amazing. Every community has its challenges and has its blessings and virtues. And every place you really learn tremendous amount.
Wow, amazing. I learned by Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz in Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Berkowitz we also have, a chevra who've been out here changing, different communities from Texas to South Africa also. Yeah. And it's very interesting as well, like when you talk to them of their communities, I love the word that you're saying that we're there to give different flavors to Judaism. Yeah. It was always the same thing. And now it's like, no, we need the Texas draw.
Yeah. So unique texture. It's a unique texture.
I love it.
Lubavitcher Rav, I think, once said that it's based on a Maharal. The Maharal says that all the Galuyos, in every Galus, right? The Gemara says in Megillah, Galu LeBavel, Shchina Imam, Galu LeEdom, Galu LeElam, Galu here. And the point is, it's not just the Shechina went with them. It's that there is a unique element of the Shechina that you discover in this place and in this place and in this place.
Like it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey of the Shechina that has to go through
part of the journey of the Shechina to heal the world, to repair the world, and really show the harmony. The ultimate vision is when the harmony, the oneness of Hashem will be revealed in the whole universe. Einoid Mulvadei, from New Zealand to Peru, from Alaska to London, from Moscow to Yerushalayim, and from Cape Town to the Congos to New York. So,
now, I know you've been involved in so many different things, and I know you've been involved from the written word to the spoken word to traveling around to in person. There's a lot of people, I feel like, that they're on a journey. We're all on a journey. At the end of the day, we're all on a journey. Hopefully we're on a journey. Hopefully we're trying to get, to elevate ourselves.
The definition of a Jew is lech lecha.
To not be stagnant.
That's the first commandment of the first Jew is lech lecha, move.
Move. So we're all going hopefully higher and growing. And a lot of times people hear words of inspiration, they hear concepts, they hear ideas, and they say, oh, I'm going to lose 50 pounds and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then they don't. And, the next day they're back to eating what they were eating yesterday. I'm not just talking about food, but proverbially, they're going to change, but they don't. I'll work on my anger, but they don't. I'm going to do it, but they don't. I'll be a better husband, wife, but they don't. How does somebody convert concepts into action, into actual change within their lives?
Right. I would say there's two major components. First of all, you have to be able to have the honesty, and you probably usually need the assistance of somebody else to be able to scrutinize yourself and ask yourself if it's possible that subconsciously you're sabotaging yourself, which means I could go on a diet. I should go on a diet. And the diet begins. But then a week later or 2 weeks later, I'm at a bris or a bar mitzvah before Corona, and I see a nice piece of cheesecake, and I break my diet. What happened? What happened was not that I was not sincere. What happened is that there are certain underlying root issues in my core. They may be unconscious that are causing me to sabotage myself. Maybe it's a deep fear of success. Some people are afraid of failure and some people are afraid of success. I often tell my students, we often say people are afraid of their darkness. I'll tell you something. People are sometimes much more afraid of their light. I have found that people have a deep fear of them being really successful in life. Deep down, there's a voice inside many of us which asks the following question: who do you think you are to be successful, to be gorgeous, to be powerful, to be influential, to change the world, to have a beautiful marriage, to have an amazing relationship with your children, with your grandchildren, to be an incredible Jew, to be an ambassador of love, light, and hope? Who do you think you are? Especially if I heard these messages as a child or as a teenager, or even if I didn't, but I absorbed such messages. And therefore, I sometimes undermine myself subconsciously. So you really have to really be able to examine the voices inside of you and inside of me, which are usually giving me a message that's holding me back from concretizing that vision. So when I say I want to do this, I don't really want to. I want to, but there's another part of me that doesn't want. That's number one, because that can really help a lot of people. Because when you can quarantine that voice, pun intended, and not allow it to control your life, you can be emancipated. The other component is you have to start translating it into action. To quote the Sefer HaChinuch in Parshas Boy, Acharei ha'pu'ulos nimshachos halavavos. Get out there. Do something. Start writing, make a blog, make a shir, reach out to people, build an institution, make a movement, create an organization, make a chevra, make a chabura, do something. When you start doing things, action changes reality. And today in psychology, we know that changes in the body are the most powerful sources of healing. It used to be, the model was CBT. You have to change your thoughts. Today, the body holds the score. That's cutting edge therapy. It's about the physical self. That's where most trauma is. It's also true in the positive. Meruba midatayva. Start with maisa bepoil, hamaisa u'ikr. Start doing something with your body. Get it off the ground. Yes, there will be criticism. It will be imperfect. But the moment you start something in actuality, now other people know about it. They create this feedback. There's an energy. So you allow the actions to drive you. Don't wait for inspiration to precede the actions. Let the actions trigger the inspiration. You will go much further.
Are you saying that if somebody has an idea in their brain, whatever it is, let's say be a better husband, a better father, whatever it is, put enough tension on the line that you're doing something different today than you did yesterday.
Yeah.
And keep recycling that around over and over, and you will eventually see something turn around.
Yeah, the Mishnah at the end, the Mishnah at the end of Peah, in the negative, but the same as in the positive. The Mishnah says if somebody feigns blindness, or that he's a cripple, or that he's lame, he won't die until he becomes that way. The other way as well, the Mishnah says, if somebody is poor and makes himself rich and doesn't take tzedakah, he will die a rich man. It's the mindset that actually creates the reality. A person is living like a rich man, you create that energy. It's a Mishnah in Peah. Wow. If I'm living like a poor man, I really create that energy. But it's also very important to have somebody who can help you identify what, if there's a skeleton or a trauma inside of you,
something that's really
holding you back, a fear.
I hear. Could you tell me about...
Many years ago, I started to write essays. I send out an essay every single Shabbos. And a lot of people get it. I don't know. I have maybe 25,000 people get it, and they send it out to other people. And I remember the first week I wrote it, I never took writing lessons, and I didn't go to a yeshiva with such good English. Let's put it that way. And I wrote it, and somebody close to me looked at it, and the person said, You're not embarrassed to send this out? You're not embarrassed to send this out? Now, at that moment, I knew, okay, that remark could literally stop me from sending out another essay for the next 50 years. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to get an editor. And I sent it out. I got a lot of criticism, and I learned from the criticism. So it's very, very important not to be afraid of people giving you negative feedback. It's one of the greatest things that stops people.
How do you know when to listen?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So there's the three types of people, okay? There are people you don't have to listen to because they just have an axe to grind. They're jealous, they're bitter, they're miserable. You don't even have to listen. You could listen, but it shouldn't register. There's another group of people who you should always listen to, and you should learn what they're saying. You should study it. They may make an interesting comment, but don't define your career based on them. And then you have to have a few individual people in your life, real rebbes, real mentors, real guides who you trust, people whose judgment you trust their love, and most importantly, you trust that they want your success. And those are people you should really listen to. Those are the three groups of people. Listen to everybody. But some people let it just slip off. Second group, listen, and if there's something to learn from it, learn from it. But don't let it define your life. And then you have to have individuals who really can help you get to the next step. And remember, ultimately, it's about your conviction. If you know what you're doing is right, and you know that this is the way where your neshama wants to go, you go for it. Because naysayers you will find always. I'll tell you a beautiful, beautiful vart. When Yeshua sends the two spies to Yericho, Kalev and Pinchas, the Haftarah of Shlach, says he sends Meragle Cheresh. So the Gemara says in Saita, he told them, Asu atzmechem kacharosh, and make believe you're deaf. So people will talk in your presence because they think you're deaf. They won't think you're spies. So somebody asked the question, you think people are so stupid? Two strangers come and they make believe they're deaf. I'm going to spill all the beans. The pshat is, he was telling Asu atzmechem kacharosh. When you're about to conquer Eretz Yisrael, everybody will tell you that it's a bad idea. You have to be able to know how to be deaf. Wow. Anybody who did anything great had to be deaf to endless criticism. It's not going to work. Not going to work. Who do you think you are? There's much greater people than you. You don't have money. You don't have this. You don't have confidence. You're not talented. You got to be a little deaf.
I want to tell you, I just came full circle on something.
About Chushim, why he was deaf.
Yeah, but say it over.
Gewaldig. Reb Chaim Lubavitcher says, the Gemara says in Saita, that when they were about to bury Yaakov Avinu, so Esav disputed the Mara Samach Pele. He said, it's mine, right? So they didn't have the deed. So they sent Naphtali to run to Egypt to bring back the deed. I don't know why they couldn't WhatsApp it. Okay, that's a good question on the Gemara. But they sent Naphtali. So Chushim, the son of Dan, was deaf. So he said, what's going on? Why is Yaakov here for hours? They told him, Esav doesn't let Yaakov be buried. He said, a chutzpah? And he gave Esav a frask. And Esav was Yizgadal v'Yizkadash. Esav was buried with Yitzchak, and Yaakov had his place in Mar Samach. Ask Reb Chaim Shmulevitch, I don't understand. You had the Yosef HaTzadik, the prime minister of Egypt, most powerful person in the world. He didn't say anything. He was fine. Esav is terrorizing the place, and you had Yehuda, Gurari Yehuda, the Melech Shebeshmotim, the man was ready to take on the world. You had Shimon and Levi. Nobody said a word. You know what Reb Chaim Shmulevitch says? He says because they weren't deaf, so they somehow became entangled in the argument. There's Esav's position, Yaakov's position, their position, my position. Chushim was deaf. He did not become entangled in the argument. He had a certain decisiveness and clarity. There was no moral ambiguity for him. It's a very powerful insight. I've seen it, debates about Israel and their enemies, Israel, Iran, the Palestinians. We often get entangled. Are we a genocide? Do we believe in genocide? Are we apartheid, ethnic cleansing? Sometimes you have to learn from Chushim. Don't allow these foolish arguments to entangle you because they're traps.
I want to tell you, I'm listening to you talk. First of all, I want to say this in a very respect. I'm blown away. There's so many things you're saying here that I'm really nisbal from. I'm thinking now of
my mother-in-law. What are you telling me for? Tell my mother-in-law.
I'm thinking again. I've never been to Farbrengen. I've never been to any of these things. But
right now you're a Farbrengen.
Oh, this is it. This is it.
Farbrengen. What do you think a Farbrengen is?
I didn't realize.
A Farbrengen is two Jews who love each other, connect heart to heart, soul to soul, mind to mind. That's a Farbrengen.
Okay, so fine. This is my first Farbrengen. My wife is sitting off camera. I don't know if you know this. I'm at a Farbrengen right now.
Rabbi Reuven, you don't need cake. You don't need herring. You don't even need vodka. All you need is a genuine heart and a genuine soul. That's it.
Okay, so I'm happy. I'm happy that I finally made it without even knowing what I was showing up to. But I want to tell you that I would imagine, because what you just said has been something that has been, you gave me such clarity and something that's been on my mind for the last few weeks and months. You know, I'm in the business world. I'm an accountant, and even as accountant, you know, within my firm, within other businesses that I'm involved with, you're always asking people for, what do you think about this? Is this a good deal, a bad deal? Should we do this? Should we do that? And you just said something that's so clear to me, that you should listen to the people who want your success.
Always, yeah.
My mind is mamish blown. Yeah. Because it's so, and that's the idea of a Rebbe. Obviously, is somebody who's further up ahead than you, and a friend is somebody who's maybe, you know, similar. But that's the key. That mamish is the key.
People who love you, people who are not jealous of you, they want to see you fly. They want to see you successful. Anybody else you're wasting your time with.
Mamish, I have to tell you, what's bringing me back to the idea of the Farbrengen is that what I'm thinking is that it's not pshat that they have. Again, you have to tell me, because this is my first Farbrengen and you only sang one song, but the idea that there's a song involved is more like I mamish want to get up and dance right now. I have to tell you, I mamish have such a happiness from what you told me, because it's been on my mind, and I hear different people say different things on different business decisions and life decisions and things. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between the naysayers and, you know, the ones who you should be listening to. And you think everyone has a good concept, a good idea. You should listen and try to filter it out. But you just gave me so much clarity. So this is my first Farbrengen, but I would imagine that they're not just dancing because it's like, it's 8:30, we got to dance. It's more like it's time to dance from the inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the response to a certain energy is only dancing.
Yes. I mamish feel it right now. I have to tell you, I mamish feel it right now. Now, a question for you.
I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
I heard this from the longtime leader of OU, Reb Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, you know, the editor of the Koran English Talmud. I heard this from him, and he's not a Chabadnik at all. So he's not choshed of, you know, sometimes Chassidim are suspected, you know, they have to build up their Rebbe. And I heard this from him, Peh. Yeah. And he told me, he said he was a Rav in Maryland, such a lesson in life. He was a Rav in Maryland, late 60s, early 70s. He went through a midlife crisis. He didn't know if he should continue in Rabbonis, if he should become a psychologist. He wanted to get a doctorate. He wanted to move away from Rabbonis, from Chinuch. He was having a lot of challenges, marriage, family, his own identity. Now, he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yoshe ber Soloveitchik Zatzal. He was a Talmud of some of the great Lubavitcher Rosh Yeshivas, but he didn't want to consult somebody who knew him. He wanted to get an opinion from, you know, just completely somebody from a different world. I heard this from him. He said, he told me I called up Rabbi Chadukov, who was the secretary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said, I didn't want to say my name. It was private. I said, Rabbi, can you give me an appointment with the Lubavitcher Rebbe? I am from Maryland. I'll drive into New York. Whenever you tell me, the Rebbe would see people at night, 8:30 at night, throughout the night, not by day. I'll come. I just want to be with him a few minutes. I need advice for my life. And he told me the words he said is, Doret Ayid from Maryland. This is a Jew from Maryland. Okay. Rabbi Chadukov said the appointment is full for 6 months. I don't think I could put you in. He says, it's very urgent. Please Could you maybe ask the Rebbe? Ask the Rebbe. Maybe he'll allow. I'm a confused Jew from Maryland. Maybe he'll help me. Rabbi Chadakov says, okay. And he dials into the Rebbe's office, and Rabbi from his office, and he says to Lubavitcher Rebbe, there's a Jew from Maryland, and he wants to come see the Rebbe. He needs advice for his life, for his future. So Rabbi Weinreb told this to me. He says, Rabbi YY, I hear the Rebbe's voice to Rabbi Chadakov. I knew the Rebbe's voice from the radio. From the radio, I knew his voice because they would broadcast his Fabrengens weekdays on the radio, like Purim, these types, Yat Kislev. He said, I hear the Rebbe tell Rabbi Chadakov, Zogem, tell him that if he lives in Maryland, there's a Jew in Maryland. His name is Weinreb. Let him go discuss his dilemmas with Weinreb. Rabbi Weinreb tells me, he says, Rabbi Jacobson, I thought I am hallucinating. So Rabbi Chadakov tells me, the Rebbe said, go speak to Weinreb in Maryland. I told Rabbi Chadakov, I'm Weinreb from Maryland. I'm the guy who's confused. Tell the Rebbe I'm Weinreb. So Rabbi Chadakov was about to faint. This is like beyond strange. So he tells the Rebbe, he is Weinreb. He's the one who wants advice. And he tells me, Rabbi Jacobson, and he became emotional. He said, the Rebbe said these words, Zogem, oibazoi, is gut. Amol, darf a Mensch sich messiahed sein mit sich allein.
Wow.
That's very good. Because sometimes a person has to consult himself.
Wow.
And that was it. Rabbi Weinreb said, it changed his life. He says, the Rebbe said, you have to really consult yourself. And he said, Ad hayoim hazeh. When I have a serious dilemma, I speak to a lot of people, but the one person I really speak to is myself.
Wow.
And I think it's so important for people. Of course, you should get advice and get advice from people who want your success. That's the people you want advice from. But it's so important to have a real conversation with yourself. Very, very important.
Wow. This is such powerful, unbelievable ideas. Let me ask you a question. As an out, again, I'm like as Litvish as, I don't know what the metaphor is. I don't know what the metaphor is, but I mean, I'm not from.
We live in a world where we're all one. Trust me.
So I have to tell you,
modern North, that's all one. Right before Mashiach, Klal Yisrael becomes one. Doesn't mean we all agree on everything. It doesn't mean we daven the same nusach. Doesn't mean we wear the same hat on Shabbos. But trust me, today I see it everywhere. I know the Litvish world very well. I know the Chassidish world. I know the Chabad world, the Orthodox world. We're mamish one. Whoever
I want to tell you
that, they're missing the boat.
No, so I want to tell you that I was about to say that. I was going to tell you that from what I see in my few years that I've been on this planet, it looks almost like there's like somebody stirring. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So much interaction between so many things which almost didn't exist, right? It was always, you're here, this is there.
You're telling me 20 years ago, I don't know if you know the history between Satmar and Chabad.
A little bit.
It was not very, how do we put it? It was not very balabatish, okay? If you would tell my father had a Yiddish newspaper, and it was very difficult with Satmar. If you would tell my father's already passed away 15 years ago, but if you would tell my father 20 years ago, just 20 years ago, not 100 years ago, that Rabbi YY Jacobson would be invited continuously to Curious Yoel Monroe or Williamsburg, my father would say, you have to be institutionalized. You have to be institutionalized. This is not shaykh. I was a kid, Mitzvah Shabbos, playing chess with my cousin, and somebody came with a big rock, a car in front of our house on Montgomery Street, and threw a huge rock into the window, and it fell 1 foot away from me. And that's why I'm alive, because of that miracle. And the person who threw the rock, unfortunately, was not a mafiosonik from Italy. It was Micheluni. There were terrible, terrible machlokes, and I don't have to tell anybody about the different disputes between the Litvisher world and the Chabad world, and a lot of other disputes in Klal Yisrael. But today we have a phenomenon that is unprecedented. And for this, we have to say, Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu. And it's not an external thing. It's grassroots. It's real. It's authentic. You know the Hatzalathon? You saw the Hatzalathon last week? They raised $15 million. It was organized by 3 Lubavitcher kids, by 3 Lubavitcher young men, 3 Chabad young men who organized it, businessmen, successful businessmen who did it, friends of mine. And they did it. And then, and Lakewood raised $2 million. And then Crown Heights, $1.5 million. And Borough Park, $2 million. It was an incredible phenomenon. Today, if you have your finger on the pulse of Klal Yisrael, you know that the Ribono Shel Olam has brought us to a place of deep unity. I know there's still machlokes and we have plenty of problems and we got to deal with it, but that's petty. That's very petty, and it's not from the pnimius. It's not from the etzem. At the core, millions of Jews, they are fed up with strife and hate and mistrust and negativity and gossip. They're mamish fed up with it. When I was a bachir, if you got up in your shul and you spoke against a certain community, you became popular. Today, you'll be booed off the stage. People don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They want to hear a message that brings out that we are one. We are children of Hashem. Our neshamas are one. The Gemara says in Yerushalmi Nedarim that we are all limbs of one body. We don't have to agree with each other, but we have to be able to trust each other. We have to be able to rely on each other. We have to be able to lean on each other, to be here for each other. I don't need my wife to agree with me. I need my wife to be here for me. I need my wife to be able to trust me, and I should be able to trust her that she has my back and I have her back. That's what we need from each other. We don't have to agree about everything, although we probably agree on most things. What most important is that we have to be able to respect each other and love each other and trust each other. And I see it. And it's a very big blessing. I know we love to criticize our generation, but I'm telling you that this is an extraordinary phenomenon. And it's a special gift. Yeah.
No, I see it from my vantage point. I'm happy that you share in that. It's funny, like the words that come to mind again for our farbring that we have to get up and dance is uva uchulam b'vris yachad nasa v'nishma amr ki yachad. But what my question is,
the kamikazes, the Japanese kamikazes.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I read that one of the last kamikazes died. In 1974, they found him in a forest with a gun, waiting to shoot down an American plane. Nobody told them that the Pacific War was over in 1945. In 1974, the man was still fighting a war. Unfortunately, I think some of us remind us of those Japanese kamikazes. The war is over. There's nothing to fight about anymore. There's nothing to fight about. We need to work together. We all have to work together to bring Mashiach. We all have to work together to be Makar of our brothers and our sisters to the Shechina. We all have to work together to inspire our youth. We all have to work together to bring healing to our world. There's enough work for everybody. The war is over. I'll tell you a word. You like good werte. Yeah. When I was a little kid, Rabbi Yoshe Soloveitchik came to a farbrengen of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1980 when the Rebbe was commemorating the 30th yahrzeit of his father-in-law. Rabbi Soloveitchik to come to a farbrengen was a big deal. And he sat there. I remember he sat there for 2 hours. He was supposed to stay for 20 minutes. But the Rebbe made a hadron on 4 mesechtas. Brachas, Yevamis, Nazir, and Krisus. Banayach. And Rabbi Soloveitchik was a hadron between the Rebbe. Rebbe was talking to Rabbi Soloveitchik. There were 10,000 people, but it was a fascinating phenomenon. Rabbi Soloveitchik was kvelling. Probably the Rebbe quoted then in one sikha hundreds of times the Rambam on the Lashon in honor. I think it was in honor of Rabbi Soloveitchik, probably. I don't know this, but it looked like it. Anyway, so Julius Berman, Rabbi Yehuda Berman, was the head of the claims conference. Leaders of OU, one of the leaders, Rabbi Julius Berman. He told me that the next day he went to Rabbi Soloveitchik and he says, they say that last night the Vilna Gaon made peace with the Baal HaTanya. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, what do you mean? It's 1980. He says, well, you're a Soloveitchik. Your father was Reb Moshe, your Zayda was Reb Chaim, your uncle was the Griz, your Elta Zayda was the Beis Halevi, your Elta Zayda was Reb Chaim Volozhiner. You're the Vilna Gaon. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is a Schneerson. He's from the Baal HaTanya. Last night, the Baal HaTanya made peace. The Vilna Gaon made peace with the Baal HaTanya when you came to 770. And Rabbi Berman told me, Rabbi Soloveitchik, he says, gave me a melancholy look. And he said, they already made peace in Auschwitz.
Oh.
He said, they already made peace in Auschwitz.
Right.
He said, Mengele did not ask people online, are you a Litvak or are you a Chassid? He really didn't care. He didn't even ask you if you're an atheist. If you had Jewish blood in your sinews, you belonged in the gas chambers. And it always gives me perspective. It always gives me perspective. If Hitler believes that we're brothers, I can also believe that we're brothers.
Wow. I hear. Now, when I look, again, from my limited knowledge, my limited scope, I know that you wrote a book on this, like the study of Hasidim. What can people learn? Because I know within Chassidus, there's so many aspects, there's so many things. The simcha, what if somebody was to take something, to be yonik, something from the study of Chassidus or watching it or learning it? First of all, is there something that somebody can read or should be reading? And second of all, just a concept, a term that somebody should be implementing that I should be implementing into my life. Not that I don't care about anybody else, but I'm asking for myself. I'm not asking for a friend.
There's a lot to learn. I mean, some of the fundamentals of the Svarim of Chassidus are books like Tanya, Keser Shem Tov by the Baal Shem Tov, Kedushas Levi by Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev, or Torah by the Maggid of Mizrich. Today they have a great resource. As Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz has a set called Bir Tanya, which really makes it very relevant. There's a set called Chassidus Mevu Eres. It's like an art scroll on Chassidus. Those are all very good works. If somebody likes classes, on theyeshiva.net, I have 200 or 300 classes on Likutei Torah of the Baal HaTanya. I think is a very, very powerful work of Chassidus that people could study. Just to bring out one point, maybe in 30, 40 seconds, I would say really that Chassidus came to accentuate and emphasize what's called the Pnimius of Torah, or what the Vilna Gaon calls in his Kabbalistic writings, the neshama of Torah, the soul of Torah. What does this mean? It means that every halacha in Nigla also has a soul, an emotional, spiritual, psychological counterpart. So for example, I'm learning about Shor Shenagachas Hapara, an ox that gores a cow. Or I'm learning the halachas of ribis, or the halachas of muktzah, or the halachas of karbonis. I'm learning about shutfim, who want to build a wall. Shutfim shiratzu lasas mechitz. Or I'm learning about a shar tam or a shar muad, or about arba avis nezikin shar bar ma'avev, or shnaim oiches and betalis. So you have the physical, concrete halacha that deals with a physical scenario. In Chassidus, that same Mishnah or same Gemara will be explored on a spiritual, psychological level. So Shnayim Oiches and Betalis or Abba Avis Nezikin will talk about 4 dimensions in your soul which cause you to become somebody who damages and sabotages your life. You spoke before about sabotaging success. Shor, bar, mava, hever. Chassidus will say, you know what a bar means? A bar means when you're depressed, you feel that you're an empty nobody. You just have a void in you. Hever means you're dealing with anger issues. Shor or mava is a machlokes. If you have addiction to food, which is shame, or adam, it's coming from your arrogance and intelligence, and shor, which means from my animalistic drives. I'm just giving one example. So every Mishnah assumes now a psychological and spiritual meaning, and it's very fascinating because it creates a new relevance to every halacha, every story in Chumash. In the world of Chassidus, every story in Chumash, Yosef and his brothers, or Cain and Hevel, or Yaakov and Esav, or mitzvahs like tefillin, shatnas, are not just concrete halachas, but they represent what's called Toras HaNefesh, a journey of the soul. Another major component of Chassidus is the way it looks at God. Usually we see God as some very powerful, king in heaven who rewards us and who punishes us, who has a contract with us, who expects certain things, which is of course true. But in Chassidus, there's a tremendous emphasis on what we call Einoid Milvadei, that Hashem is not really a being. Hashem is reality. In other words, the word Hashem is really just another word for reality. Everything, the DNA of existence is divine energy. Basara Mamaris Nivra Ha'olam means everything is divine energy. So we are Hashem. We are all part of Hashem. We're all part of the divine reality, which means that serving Hashem is not just serving a king in heaven. It really means a relationship with your own deepest self, with your own pnimius. So a big focus of Chassidus was turning Hashem from a king in heaven into the ultimate core of your reality. In other words, Avodas Hashem means the ultimate relationship with yourself. I think another major component is sometimes people look at Judaism in terms of a contract. It's like Hashem makes a contract with me. It's a checkoff list. You know, you do Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, you learn, you do mitzvahs, and you get Olam Haba. And you don't, you get Gehenna. It's like you're an employee. And I think Chassidus emphasized very much the idea that there's an intimate relationship. It's not that I'm doing Torah and mitzvahs in order to have Gan Eden. Rather, I'm doing Torah and mitzvahs because Torah and mitzvahs is the ultimate Gan Eden, because you and Hashem are mamish one. You're an ambassador of Hashem. You're a manifestation of Hashem. A relationship with Hashem means a relationship with your deepest reality. There's nothing greater than that. Schar mitzvah. The Baal HaTanya says the greatest schar of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. It's even much deeper than Gan Eden. That's why Chassidus, the words reward and punishment were somewhat not canceled, but they're a second tier. The main focus is realizing who you are, what it means to be a Jew. Another major focus is the achdus of the neshamas. Another major focus is the fact that the world is one. The whole world is really one. These are some of interesting, meaningful ideas that are very much accentuated. They weren't invented, but they're very much accentuated in the world of Chassidus. I would also say that in today's day and age, especially, there is so much spiritual competition out there. There's a lot of cutting edge spirituality and psychology and quantum physics, and sophisticated Jews, if for them to really celebrate Yiddishkeit as something deep and meaningful, Yiddishkeit has to be very, very deep. And from my research, I have found that the writings of Chassidus really reveal that level of sophistication in Judaism, which borders on themes of quantum physics, quantum reality, string theory, DNA, understanding of DNA, of epigenetics, of molecular biology, because it basically discusses Yiddishkeit and Torah and mitzvahs and spirituality from a very, very deep, transcendent spiritual place. So in that sense, there's also, I think, something very compelling and powerful. Anyway, these are some of very brief ideas.
I have to be more on the yeshiva.net, that's for sure. I want to start studying this. Question, maybe our last question here. You had mentioned before about turning mundane, I'm going to call it mundane, but seemingly mundane mitzvahs, yamim tovim, these kinds of things into something a little bit deeper and more meaningful. What could you share with me on Shavuos itself? It's coming up in a few days. Either a machshava, an idea, or maybe even just a practical idea how somebody can take this day and instead of just being about cheesecake and staying up, it's very interesting because you watch people who come to learn. And I know this year is a funny year in that regard, if shuls will be open or how exactly it will be. It's like people come in and they're like already like schwitzing, like they need their coffee and then they come in and they need their candy and they come like we're like so geared up. How could somebody take their Shavuos this year and elevate it?
I think the most important thing to remember about Shavuos is the idea that the Torah was given not to malachim, it was given to, as the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, to souls who are here, down here, lamata, in this world. And what that really means is, as it's explained, in Chassidus, there's a beautiful mimer from the Baal HaTanya, why Hashem gave the Torah in a desert. You want to marry your fiance, take them to the Ritz-Carlton or to the Hilton. A desert, a wilderness, a pasnish, it's not the place of a wedding. But really, there's a very profound message here. And Torah was not given for people who live in a la-la land. Torah was given in a desert to teach us that we have the resources and the ability to confront the wilderness inside of us. Within each and every person, there's wilderness. There's a part of us that's dry, that's parched, it's not cultivated. The sun is very, very hard. There's no growth. There's no vegetation. It's the parts of us that are dead, that are infertile, that are lifeless. That's what a midbar is. The pasuk says in Yirmiyah, Lech dich acharei b'midbar be'eretz lo yizruah, a place where there's no produce, there's no vegetation. That's exactly where Matan Torah was. You know why? When you look in the mirror psychologically and you feel that there's so many parts of me that they're infertile, they're disastrous, they're like a desert. It's fascinating that the first word of Aseres HaDibros is Anoichi. It says in Medrash Tanchuma, Anoichi is not a Hebrew word, it's an Egyptian word. Anoichi Lashon Mitzri. Enoich in Egyptian is I. Hashem should have said Ani, not Anoichi. Why is the first word of Aseres HaDibros in Egyptian? Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. I once heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he said a beautiful word, to teach you that the purpose of Torah is ultimately to transform the Mitzrayim inside of you and the Mitzrayim in the world. It's in the midbar. It's when I look at myself and I see that there's parts of me that are not cultivated. It's a wilderness. I have trauma. I have toxicity. I have insecurities. I have demons. I have skeletons. I have negative voices. I have issues to work with. Don't be afraid. That's exactly where the Torah is given. That's exactly where you're going to see the impact of Torah. Have the courage to confront it, because realize that if you could confront your own wilderness, that's where your greatest growth is going to come from. Your deepest growth, your deepest relationship to Torah is if you're ready to confront that which crushes you, that which makes you small, that which makes you into the person you don't like. If you could look at that and learn from it, it will allow you to become the greatest person in the world. Wow.
I wanna just ask your thoughts on something, and then I'm gonna let you go. Meaning it's chutz to have this hour and a half. I don't know what I did to deserve this.
Somebody waiting for a big shir, so I'm just gonna tell them that I'm coming on in 1 minute. So ask your last question.
Okay, my last question is just simple. That I feel like there's a push or a natural thing that somebody can tap into to sort of feeling if their neshama feels like it's pulsing and alive, versus feeling empty and dead. And there's so many things in this world that give us external stimulation. But when you just ask your neshama, like, how do you feel this morning? You give it like a little checkup. You're able to feel like alive. You learn a taisvus, you feel alive. And so much of what you talked about tonight, whether it's through learning the nezikin, which part's holding your back, if you're able to tap into that, then Yom Tov becomes alive and mitzvahs become alive, and your purpose in this world comes alive. You're able to like feel your neshama's like beating like a good, strong heart. That like, I'm feeling that from you. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you for the honor. Thank you for the privilege, Rabbi Reuven. My love and my blessings to you and your family, and continue with your avodas hakodesh.
Amen. Amen. Have a good evening. Have a good evening, and thank you all for tuning in to this 11th show. We hope to see everybody again after Shavuos. Have a good evening.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.